Why was everyone staring at her like she didn't belong? The emergency lights of the Apache helicopter flashed blood red across the hangar, bathing everything in the hue of danger. Heat shimmered through the air like the base itself was breathing hard. Somewhere, an alarm screamed, sharp, metallic, echoing through the massive steel ribs of fob thunder. Inside that chaos stood a woman everyone had already dismissed. Her name was May Carter. Civilian clothes, worn jeans, a faded gray shirt clinging to sweat and desert dust. She looked like someone's aunt who had wandered in by mistake. Her hair, streaked with gray, clung to her temples, and her hands trembled just enough to draw whispers. The whispers weren't kind. Who called her in? Is she even cleared for this area? Some old lady with shaky hands. You've got to be kidding. And yet, standing 10 meters away, she didn't flinch. She held a tool bag, old, patched with duct tape, the kind of bag that had stories written into every scratch. Staff Sergeant Kyle Mason, 26, sharp jaw, sharp tongue, turned toward her, wiping oil from his fingers. He barked, "Ma'am, this isn't a museum tour. You need to head home and tend to your grandkids. We've got a real crisis here." He meant it as a dismissal. But she didn't even blink. Because May Carter didn't come to Fob Thunder by accident. The order had come from Master Sergeant Tom Harrison, a man whose instincts had saved more lives than most soldiers ever knew. He told the commander just one thing. If that bird's going to fly again, call the widow. And so she came. 3 hours earlier, chaos had already been spreading like wildfire. A voice on the radio, strained, cracking with static, had carried the kind of message every base fears. Apache down, birds grounded at LZ Charlie 15 clicks out, pilot injured, severe shrapnel, 3-hour window for medevac or he's gone. The pilot's name, Captain Martinez. He was bleeding out somewhere in the desert, trapped in enemy territory. And the only helicopter that could reach him wouldn't start. A sandstorm had rolled in from the north, turning the horizon into a wall of gold and death. The wind howled at 60 miles an hour, clawing at tents and equipment. The storm had grounded all ground vehicles and most drones. The only way to save the pilot was to fly, but the last operational Apache sat silent in Hangar 3, its engine dead, its heart refusing to beat. Master Sergeant Harrison knew what that meant. He'd seen engines fail before, but this one wasn't routine. 6 hours of diagnostics, 6 hours of frustration. Every protocol checked, every sensor replaced, every wire traced. And still nothing. He stood in the operations center, hands on hips, staring at the digital schematic glowing red. "We're out of time," he muttered. Major Stevens, the base commander, glanced up. "Then what do you suggest?" Harrison's jaw clenched. "We call May Carter." Stevens frowned. "Who?" Harrison didn't explain. He just said it again, slower. "The widow." Now in the blistering hangar, the woman they'd called the widow stood surrounded by 20 engineers who didn't believe in ghosts or miracles, but she might be both. Kyle Mason kicked the side of the helicopter's engine housing in frustration. "We've replaced everything," he said. "Primary oxygen sensor, backup sensor, control module, nothing. The system won't even try to start." Right, another NCO nodded grimly. "We can't risk field modifications. We need factory-certified replacements from Boeing. Otherwise, it's a no-go." "That'll take 72 hours, Kyle shot back. "The pilot doesn't have that long." And that's when May Carter walked in. No introduction, no clearance badge, just a quiet presence that drew stares. Her eyes flicked around the hangar, mapping exits, corners, shadows, movements that weren't casual. Movements of someone who had once been trained to survive ambushes. "Excuse me, ma'am," Kyle said, stepping in front of her. "This area's restricted. Civilian contractors need to check in with." But she wasn't listening. Her gaze was fixed on the Apache's engine, the way a medic looks at a dying patient. "I'm here for the engine," she said softly. Kyle laughed. "The engine? Lady, this is an AH-64 Apache attack helicopter, not a crop duster. You need clearance, certification, years of training just to touch it." May didn't argue. She knelt beside her old tool bag and unzipped it with steady, deliberate hands. The sound was small, leather scraping against metal teeth, but it cut through the hanger like a blade. Inside, the tools weren't new or shiny. They were used, personal, and arranged in perfect order. She checked each one, not mechanically, but with ritual precision. Sergeant Park, the crew chief, noticed something different: the rhythm, the discipline. "She's doing a pre-mission check," he whispered. "Not a contractor's setup. That's muscle memory." Kyle crossed his arms. "Lady," I said. "Did Harrison send you?" Park interrupted. May nodded. "He said you had a bird that won't start." Kyle scoffed. "We don't need help. We've got our best people working this problem." Her eyes flicked toward him, calm, sharp, unbothered. "Then your best people missed something." The silence that followed hit harder than the heat. Kyle took a step forward. "Missed something? I've been on Apache systems for 6 years. You think you're going to stroll in here and—" She didn't respond. Instead, she pulled out a small flashlight, old, military grade. Before she switched it on, she checked it like a soldier checks a weapon, a movement too precise to be coincidence. Park saw it. He said quietly, "That's a brass check." Kyle blinked. "A what?" Park didn't answer. His gut was already telling him that whoever this woman was, she wasn't a civilian technician. May moved past them toward the engine compartment. Kyle stepped in front of her again. "You're not touching this aircraft." She looked at him, not angry, just disappointed. "You opened the engine cowling wrong." "What did you just say?" "The safety protocol. You didn't disconnect the power. That indicator light's still armed. You could have fried the electrical system." Kyle froze. The yellow glow inside the engine bay flickered faintly, unnoticed until now. Park moved closer. "She's right," he said quietly. "System still live." The room went still. Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to pause. For the first time, Kyle's confidence cracked. That's just a small oversight." "Maybe," May said, "but small oversights kill pilots." She leaned into the compartment, tracing the wiring like she'd known it her entire life. Her trembling hands were steady now, moving with eerie precision. "These aren't just dead sensors," she murmured. "They're counterfeit." The word counterfeit landed like a grenade. "What?" Wright asked. May pointed to the serial numbers stamped into the metal. "These parts don't match the maintenance database. They're knockoffs, cheap, dangerous." Kyle shook his head. "Impossible. All our parts come through secure military supply." She reached into her bag, pulled out a rugged military tablet, the kind that survived heat, sand, and war zones. The casing was scuffed. The screen was cracked, but it worked. She typed in the number. Waited. When the results came up, her expression darkened. "This part was stolen from a warehouse in Germany 6 months ago," she said. "Marked for destruction." She looked up at them. "You've been flying with fake parts." Tors, a young investigator from CID, appeared at the hangar door, drawn by the commotion. "Master Sergeant Harrison called me, said something about counterfeit components." May handed him the tablet without a word. He read the data, then exhaled. "We've got a problem, a big one." No one spoke. Even Kyle, who moments ago had been mocking her, was staring at the woman like she just walked out of a classified report. "Ma'am," Tors asked, "how'd you know to check serial numbers?" May's answer was quiet, "Because I've seen this pattern before." Park tilted his head. "Where?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into the engine, disconnecting the counterfeit sensor with surgical precision. The movement was fluid, practiced, the kind of muscle memory that comes from repetition under stress. "I used to work on Apache," she said finally. Kyle blinked. "When?" 15 years ago. Wright frowned. "Ma'am, these systems have changed completely in 15 years. She didn't argue. Instead, she pulled a copper wire from her bag, stripped it with her teeth, and began building something none of them recognized, a field bypass. "What are you doing?" "Improvising." "That's not in the manual," Wright protested. "It's not supposed to be." Her tone was calm, unshaken. "When you're deployed and someone's dying, you don't wait for perfect parts. You make do with what you have." The hangar watched her in silence, the trembling woman who somehow radiated command. Park whispered almost reverently, "She's done this before." "Ma'am," he asked, "what unit did you serve with?" Her hands froze for just a heartbeat. Then she said quietly, "That's classified." Torres looked up sharply. In the military, classified wasn't a word thrown around lightly. It meant something deeper, darker. As she worked, her hands moved like she was remembering something painful, maybe a place, maybe a face. The tremor returned faintly, only when she paused. When she finished the makeshift repair, she stepped back. "The engine should start now," she said. "Should," Wright repeated. May's gaze didn't waver. "I've done this under fire, it works." Her voice carried no arrogance, just certainty. Kyle hesitated, looking at the bypass, crude but elegant, wires woven like veins. He swallowed hard. "I trust it." May climbed into the pilot's seat with a familiarity that made Park's stomach twist. Her fingers traced the controls, not like a mechanic, like someone who had once flown. "Beginning start sequence," she announced. One by one, her hands danced across the panel. Switches flipped. Indicators blinked green. The turbine whined to life, a mechanical heartbeat rising from the dead. The engine roared. The hangar filled with the thunder of rebirth, the Apache alive again after 6 silent hours. Kyle's mouth hung open. Wright just whispered, "No way." But May didn't smile. She just whispered to herself, too softly for anyone else to hear. "You always come back, don't you?" Outside, the sandstorm raged on. Inside, the sound of the Apache's engine drowned out doubt, disbelief, and every insult that had been thrown at her. Because for the first time, they weren't looking at an old woman anymore. They were looking at a ghost from a past no one remembered, and yet she just saved them all. And none of them knew that this was only the beginning. That the widow hadn't come to fix an engine. She'd come to finish a mission. Why did her hands stop shaking the moment the engine came to life? Maybe it wasn't the machine that needed fixing. Maybe it was her. The Apache roared in the hangar, blades trembling with power, dust lifting from the concrete floor like ghosts rising to salute their commander. The men stood frozen, their disbelief swallowed by the growl of a living machine. Then silence. May Carter shut the engine down with precise, ritual movements, not like a mechanic ending a test, but like a pilot finishing a flight. She climbed out of the cockpit, calm, controlled, expression unreadable. Around her, 20 soldiers who had dismissed her minutes ago now watched her like she was something more than human, something legendary. Kyle Mason took a hesitant step forward. "Ma'am, how did you know?" May didn't answer. She set her wrench down carefully, wiped her gloves, and said only, "Because this isn't the first time someone tried to kill an Apache from the inside." Her words hung heavy in the air. Torres, the CID investigator, broke the silence first. "You're saying this wasn't a malfunction?" "I'm saying," she replied, "that someone knew what they were doing." 3 hours earlier, the storm had sealed them inside the base like prisoners. Now, it pressed against the hangar doors with a howl that felt alive. The desert was invisible, swallowed by wind and dust. Master Sergeant Harrison entered, his uniform streaked with sand. "I heard the engines running." "It's fixed," Kyle said. "She fixed it." Harrison's eyes found May, and for the first time since she'd arrived, someone in the room didn't look surprised to see her. He gave a small nod. "Good to see you again, widow." The word cut through the hangar like a secret too dangerous to speak. The younger soldiers turned, curiosity sparking in their faces. "Widow," Park repeated quietly. "That's her call sign." Harrison didn't answer. But May did. It was. Torres stepped closer, holding the tablet she'd used to identify the stolen parts. "You were right. Both sensors are counterfeit. I cross-checked the serials stolen 6 months ago, both marked for destruction." Harrison swore under his breath. "Someone been feeding us fake components." May nodded. "Not just fake, stolen, swapped into our supply chain to make it look legitimate." Torres frowned. "That's not small-time corruption, that's systemic." She met his eyes. "It's sabotage." For a moment, no one spoke. Outside, thunder from the storm blended with the mechanical hum of other aircraft. The sound seemed to pulse like a heartbeat, steady, foreboding. Then May said quietly, "Who signs off on your parts inventory?" A voice answered from the doorway. "I do." Everyone turned. Warrant Officer Rodriguez stepped inside, a man in his mid-40s, pale from office lights, confidence just a little too polished. He smiled when he saw May, though the smile didn't reach his eyes. "What's all this about sabotage?" he asked, walking in as if the hangar belonged to him. Torres handed him the tablet. 2 stolen oxygen sensors, counterfeits installed on an Apache. Rodriguez looked down, his face tightening for a fraction of a second. Then the mask slid back into place. "There must be a database error. Our supply chain is fully verified." "Then how do you explain this?" Torres asked. Rodriguez shrugged. "You'd be surprised how often serials get duplicated. I'll file a report, have Boeing verify authenticity." But May wasn't watching the tablet. She was watching him. The way his pupils contracted when Torres said counterfeit. The way his right hand flexed, the hand of someone who'd just been caught. "Warrant Officer," she said softly, "how long have you known me?" He blinked, confused. "Excuse me." "How long have you known May Carter?" "I don't, we just met." Her mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Interesting, because 15 years ago, you were the supply sergeant for the 161st Special Operations Aviation Regiment, Black Widow Squadron." The color drained from his face. The hangar went dead quiet. Kyle's voice broke the silence. "Black Widow Squadron, that's just a rumor." Harrison's tone hardened. "Not a rumor, a unit so classified it didn't exist on paper." Rodriguez took a step back. "You've got no proof of that." May reached into her pocket, pulled out a challenge coin. She held it up to the light, the insignia gleamed. An eagle gripping rotor blades, the words "Death from above." "Black Widow 3, she said quietly, "the only one who made it home." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Rodriguez ran. He almost made it to the door before security intercepted him. CID agents, summoned by Torres' earlier call, moved in fast, weapons drawn, voices sharp. "Warrant Officer Rodriguez, you're under arrest for conspiracy, theft of government property, and endangering military personnel." The click of handcuffs echoed across the hangar. Rodriguez didn't resist. He just looked at May and whispered, "You should have stayed dead." May's eyes were calm. "A lot of people tried to make sure I did." As security led him away, Major Stevens entered, his face tight with confusion and awe. "Chief Carter," he said, addressing her by the rank she hadn't worn in 15 years. "I've been told you saved my helicopter and exposed a supply chain corruption case in the same morning. I'd like to know who exactly I have working in my hangar." "I'm no longer in the system, sir," May said. That was the deal when they buried the Black Widow files. Stevens frowned, buried. She nodded toward Tors. Your investigator has everything you need: stolen serials, missing components, falsified requisitions. It's not just this base. It's networked. Tors added, sir, I've already found irregularities at other fobs, same counterfeit parts, same suppliers. Stevens exhaled slowly. Then this isn't a one-off. This is organized theft. No, sir, May said softly. It's organized betrayal. Hours later, the hangar had emptied, but sleep hadn't returned to the base. The storm still howled beyond the walls, but inside, a different kind of storm was building. May sat alone at a workbench, the glow of a single lamp washing her face in gold and shadow. The Apache sat behind her, silent, alive, waiting. Her hands trembled again, but not from fear, from memory. She turned her challenge coin over between her fingers. On the back was a small engraving, a call sign. Black Widow 3. The last of her unit. In her mind, she could still hear their voices, laughter over radio static, the hum of rotor blades over desert valleys, and the last, broken call from a mission that had ended in fire. Black Widow 1, taking fire, losing power, if anyone hears this. Hold on, I'm coming in hot. Negative Widow 3, get out, that's an order. Then static. Then silence. 15 years later, it still haunted her. She whispered into the empty hangar, I told you I'd keep them flying. At 200, Tors entered quietly, holding a report. Ma'am, he said, I think you'll want to see this. She looked up, her eyes tired but alert. Go ahead. Rodriguez's accounts show payments routed through shell companies, traced back to Eastern Europe, same supplier that refurbished Apache systems last year. May's jaw tightened, and those same facilities were flagged in a classified investigation from 15 years ago. She stared at him. Black Widow Squadron. He nodded, yes, ma'am. For a moment the room felt smaller. Everything she'd tried to bury was resurfacing, piece by piece. Tors hesitated, then asked, why did they call you the Widow? May's eyes drifted to the darkened cockpit. Because everyone else died. Morning came quietly, the storm lifting into a sky streaked with pink and ash. The base was awake before dawn, soldiers whispering about the woman who'd resurrected an Apache and unmasked a traitor in the same night. Some called her a ghost, others called her a hero. But most just called her ma'am. Kyle found her by the flight line, tightening a bolt on the helicopter she'd saved. Ma'am, he said, voice tentative, I owe you an apology. For what? For treating you like you didn't belong. She gave a faint smile. You were protecting your aircraft, that's what good soldiers do. He hesitated, then asked, were you really a pilot? She looked toward the horizon where the desert met the morning light. I was a lot of things, she said quietly. Pilot, mechanic, ghost. The wind shifted, warm, dry, carrying the faint whine of distant rotors. But right now, she added, I'm just someone making sure another soldier gets home alive. By noon, Captain Martinez was ready for evacuation. The repaired Apache would lead the medevac flight through the thinning storm. Major Stevens watched from the command platform as the aircraft taxied across the runway. I still don't understand, he said to Harrison. How does someone like her just disappear from the records? Harrison's answer was simple. Some missions don't make it into history, sir. Some soldiers are ghosts because that's how command keeps them alive. Down on the tarmac, May Carter placed her hand on the Apache's side, feeling the hum of life beneath the armor. Her fingers traced the painted words, Widow's Watch. An old squadron nickname, one she hadn't seen since the night everything ended. She whispered, let's fly again, old friend. The engine started, the rotors sliced the air, and for the first time in years, May Carter's hands didn't shake. She watched the medevac lift off into the clearing sky. the sound of the blades echoing like the heartbeat of everything she'd lost. And somewhere deep inside, she knew this wasn't over. Because the counterfeit parts weren't the real danger. They were a symptom. The disease was deeper, older, and May Carter, the widow who wasn't supposed to exist, was the only one left who knew how to stop it. How do you sleep when ghosts keep calling your name? For May Carter, the answer was simple. You don't. 3 days after the Apache's resurrection, Fob Thunder no longer sounded like a forward bass. It breathed like a living thing, restless, waiting. Rumors about the widow had spread across the desert faster than sand carried by the wind. Pilots whispered her name over encrypted channels. Mechanics left her coffee they were too afraid to offer in person. Everyone wanted to see the woman who had fixed the unfixable and exposed the rot hiding inside their own supply lines. At 5:30, the hangar lights burned white against the gray dawn. May stood inside, sleeves rolled up, eyes sharp despite another sleepless night. Around her, pieces of an Apache engine lay scattered on work tables like fragments of a heart mid-surgery. She wasn't fixing a machine anymore. She was dissecting a secret. Footsteps echoed. "Chief," came a low voice. She didn't turn. Only one man called her that anymore. Master Sergeant Harrison stepped into the light, carrying 2 steaming mugs of bitter army coffee. His uniform still smelled faintly of jet fuel. "You still run on caffeine and stubbornness, I see." May accepted the mug. "You used to call that standard procedure." He smirked. "Still do." They stood in silence for a moment, the hum of generators filling the space between them. Then Harrison said, "Pentagon's sending an investigation team. They'll be here tomorrow. DIA, CID, and someone from a special access review board, whatever that means." May's eyes flickered. "It means someone high up just got nervous." He nodded. "They specifically asked for you." "I figured." "Word is they want to read you back into service, maybe even reinstate your rank." May sipped the coffee. "That's not what this is about." "No," Harrison agreed, "but it might be about what happened 15 years ago." Her jaw tightened. "Black Widow Squadron." "Yeah," he said quietly. "They're digging up graves, May." Across the hangar, Kyle Mason approached carrying a tablet. He looked different now, posture straighter, confidence tempered by humility. "Chief Carter," he said, "inspection reports from all rotary wing birds on base. You were right. We found 47 counterfeit components, sensors, bearings, even flight control chips." May set her mug down. 47. "Yes, ma'am. 12 helicopters affected." Harrison whistled softly. "If those birds had flown combat missions, they'd be coffins," May finished. She turned to Kyle. "Good work, Sergeant. Keep your team on lockdown. No one touches another aircraft without verification." "Yes, ma'am." He hesitated, then added, "I want to learn how you spotted those fakes so fast. My team ran every diagnostic and we missed them." May studied him, experience and loss. Kyle waited, sensing the weight behind her words, but she didn't elaborate. Some stories, she thought, had to stay buried until the right moment. By 700, Lieutenant Torres arrived, eyes shadowed from another night without sleep. He carried a folder thick with fresh intel. "Ma'am," he said, "we traced the counterfeit parts through 3 shell companies. Same financial trail points to a refurb facility in Eastern Europe. You'll love this. It's the same facility flagged in a classified report from 15 years ago." May looked up sharply. "Afghanistan." He nodded. "That's the one." The room seemed to shrink. Harrison leaned against a crate. "You told me once that the Widow Squadron's last mission went sideways because of a supply failure. Faulty rotor coupling, wasn't it?" May's hand stilled on the workbench. "Not faulty, replaced." Torres flipped through his folder. "Replaced with identical parts, counterfeit serials, Same pattern as what we found here. Kyle frowned. You're saying someone been running this scam for more than a decade. Not a scam, May murmured. A strategy. At 900, Major Stevens called an emergency briefing. The air in the operations room felt heavy with heat and unspoken fear. Maps, flight manifests, procurement logs, all glowed across the digital wall display. Tours presented first. Evidence confirms a coordinated supply chain infiltration spanning multiple theaters. Counterfeit components have been introduced through legitimate contracts, compromising over 300 aircraft. The room buzzed with disbelief. Stevens looked to May. Chief Carter, in your professional opinion, how is that even possible? She spoke softly, but her words carried across the room. Because trust is the easiest thing to weaponize. Eyes turned toward her. In war, she continued, you expect the enemy to attack from outside the wire, but corruption doesn't wear a uniform. It hides behind paperwork, behind familiar faces, behind phrases like standard procedure and proper channels. That's why it works. Silence. Even Stevens had no answer. After the briefing, May returned to the hangar alone. She preferred engines to conversations. Metal didn't lie. She opened the side panel of another Apache and stared at the rows of sensors gleaming like false teeth. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the polished metal, older, wearier than she remembered. 15 years. 15 years of pretending. She was just a mechanic who couldn't stop her hands from shaking. She reached for her challenge coin, the insignia of a squadron erased from history, and ran her thumb over the edges until the memories cut deep enough to bleed. We were supposed to be invisible, she thought. Instead, we disappeared. At 11:20, Torres rushed in, phone pressed to his ear. Chief, we've got chatter from other bases. Same counterfeit pattern showing up everywhere. Someone tried to scrub the digital logs right after we flagged them. Meaning they know we're onto them. May's pulse steadied, then they'll move fast. How fast? She checked her watch, hours maybe less. Outside, the wind shifted again, a dry gust carrying the faint, rhythmic chop of distant rotors. By mid-afternoon, the sky turned the color of copper. The desert shimmered with heat, mirages dancing across the horizon. May stood on the tarmac watching the medevac helicopter return from its mission. Captain Martinez alive, stabilized, evacuated just in time. Kyle ran up beside her, grinning. He made it. The pilot's going to be okay. For the first time in days, May allowed herself a small smile. Good. That means the fight was worth it. Kyle looked at her curiously. Fight. She didn't answer. Her eyes were on the horizon, where the heat haze looked too structured, too deliberate. Jifa. She narrowed her gaze. You ever notice how trouble always shows up right after success? Evening brought a deceptive calm. The sandstorm was gone, the base glowing gold under the sinking sun. In the mess hall, soldiers spoke quietly about the mysterious woman who'd saved them. May ate alone at a corner table, untouched food cooling beside her. Harrison joined her without asking. They're saying you're being reinstated, he said. She nodded. Major Stevens mentioned it. You gonna take it? I don't know. You should. She looked up. Why? Because people listen to rank, and right now, you're the only one they should be listening to. Her gaze drifted to the window, the Apache silhouette visible in the fading light. They buried me once already, Tom. I'm not sure I want to crawl back out. He leaned forward. Maybe it's not about what you want. Maybe it's about what they need. She didn't reply, because she knew he was right. Night fell hard and fast. Fob Thunder's floodlights cut sharp cones through the darkness. Somewhere beyond the perimeter, the desert whispered secrets in a language only soldiers understood. May was back in Hangar 3, running another inspection. She felt it before she saw it, that subtle pressure in the air, the instinct that something was off. A faint shadow crossed the wall, then another. She moved toward the side door, eyes scanning, heart steady. Through the narrow window she saw them, 4 helicopters, lights off, approaching low from the north. She froze. The base's radar should have picked them up hours ago. They were flying too tight, too fast, too quiet. Her gut clenched, not friendly. She sprinted for the control station. "Command, this is Carter in Hangar 3, incoming rotary formation. Bearing 13, low altitude, no transponders." "Static." Then the alarm sirens wailed. Major Stevens' voice crackled over the PA. "All personnel take defensive positions. Unknown aircraft inbound." Harrison burst through the door, rifle in hand. "They came early." "Who?" Kyle shouted. "The people trying to erase evidence," May said flatly. "They're here to burn it all." Explosions ripped through the far end of the runway, shockwaves rattling the hangar walls. "Those aren't supply birds," Harrison growled. "They're attack choppers." May's voice cut through the chaos. "Get to the Apache. If they want it destroyed, we make sure it fights back." Under tracer fire and swirling sand, May climbed into the cockpit. Kyle scrambled beside her, shaking but determined. "Pre-flight checklist," she barked. "Yes, ma'am." Her fingers flew across the console, flipping switches with the muscle memory of someone who'd done this in darker places. Outside, gunfire streaked the night. A rocket exploded near the hangar, shattering glass and drenching them in a rain of dust and light. "Engine spool up." "Online." "Weapons armed." "Armed." The rotors screamed to life, slicing the desert air. Stevens' voice came through the comms, panicked. "Chief Carter, you are not authorized." May cut him off. "Authorization denied, permission irrelevant," lifting off. The Apache surged upward into the burning sky. Below, flames crawled across the tarmac. Above, 4 enemy helicopters fanned out in attack formation. And somewhere deep inside, the part of May Carter that had been buried 15 years ago, the soldier, the pilot, the widow, came alive again. The first missile streaked past her canopy. She rolled left, diving, counterflaring in one motion. Kyle's breath hitched. "Holy, you're flying like I never stopped," she said. Her voice was calm, steady, terrifyingly sure. She climbed, spun, fired, twin hellfires lancing into the night. 2 targets vanished in plumes of orange flame. The remaining helicopters broke formation, scattering. But the widow hunted them one by one, the Apache roaring like vengeance reborn. When the last attacker fell blazing into the desert, the radio crackled with stunned silence. Then Stevens' voice, softer now, "Fob thunder, all clear." May brought the Apache down gently, dust swirling in gold halos around the landing gear. The base's floodlights caught her face through the canopy, calm, unreadable. When she stepped out, the soldiers waiting below didn't cheer. They just stared. Because they all understood what they'd just seen. Not a miracle. Not luck. A soldier coming home to the only battlefield she ever truly knew. She set her helmet on the maintenance table beside her old, patched tool bag. Her hands were steady again. "Chief Carter," Stevens said quietly, walking up to her, "I think it's time you told me exactly who you are." May looked past him toward the burning horizon, where the last wreck still smoldered. Then she said, almost gently, "I'm the reason you still have a base, sir." Her voice was calm, her eyes colder than steel. "And I think," she added, "you're about to find out why the widow never dies." When the dust settled, only silence remained. The kind of silence that comes after the storm, when survival feels too heavy to celebrate. Fob Thunder looked like a battlefield torn between ruin and defiance. The fire teams were still dousing the last of the wreckage. The smell of jet fuel and burnt metal hung thick in the dawn air. And May Carter, The woman they once called the widow stood in the middle of it all, her hair tangled, her uniform jacket streaked with ash, her expression carved from stone. The Apache behind her still steamed from the fight. The rotors turned slow, tired, like the heart of an old soldier who refused to die. She didn't speak, she didn't need to. Every soldier on that flight line already knew what she'd done. Major Stevens approached cautiously, flanked by Harrison and Tors. He looked exhausted, not just from the night's chaos, but from the weight of realizing that the woman standing before him was more than his chain of command could ever explain. "Chief Carter," he said, voice hoarse, "you saved this base. You saved all of us." May shook her head. "I just did my job, sir." "No," Stevens said, his tone firm. "You did more than that. You fought back when no one else could." Harrison gave a tired grin. "That's the widow for you." Stevens looked between them. "Then it's time we stop pretending she's a civilian contractor." He turned to Tors. "Get word to command. I want Chief Carter reinstated immediately." But May's voice cut through, low and deliberate. "Don't do that yet." They all turned to her. She was staring at the burning wrecks on the horizon. Whoever sent those helicopters wanted this base wiped clean. That wasn't random. They came for evidence, and for me. Reinstating me before we understand why we'll paint a target bigger than you can defend. Stevens frowned. "You think they'll come again?" May finally looked at him. "They never stop coming." By midday, the Pentagon investigation team had landed. 2 Blackhawks and a C-130 full of suits, analysts, and military intelligence personnel. They brought the smell of polished leather, classified briefcases, and the kind of authority that didn't need to shout to make soldiers nervous. At their head was Colonel Bradley, a man whose handshake could freeze a room. Civilian clothes but military posture, his tone polite but cutting. He walked straight toward May, stopping just shy of arm's length. "Chief Warrant Officer May Carter," he said, using a rank she hadn't heard in 15 years. "We need to talk." May studied him. That's what people usually say right before something bad happens. Bradley smiled faintly. "Depends on which side of the truth you stand on." The debriefing took place inside the base's situation room, a concrete bunker humming with electronics and tension. Tors handled the evidence. Harrison stood silent by the door, and Stevens observed from the side, hands folded tight. Bradley began with formality. "Chief Carter, your name disappeared from every database 15 years ago, following the termination of the classified aviation unit known as Black Widow Squadron." May didn't answer. He continued, "Official records indicate all members KIA during an operation near Kandahar. You, however, are alive. Care to explain?" May leaned back in her chair, voice quiet. "You already know why. You just want to hear me say it." "Say it anyway." Her gaze dropped to the table. "The operation wasn't a failure, it was sabotage." Bradley's pen froze mid-note. "Counterfeit components," she continued. "Same pattern as what we found here. Engine control modules swapped for cheap copies. One of our birds lost lift mid-mission. The others went down trying to pull them out." The room was dead still. Tors whispered, "So it's the same network." "Not the same," May said softly. "The same bloodline." Bradley set his pen down. "Chief Carter, the Department of Defense believes the attack last night wasn't a local incident. The pattern matches corruption and infiltration stretching across multiple commands. We're forming a task force to investigate supply chain sabotage. We want you to lead it." Harrison let out a low whistle. "That's a hell of an offer." But May didn't react. Her expression didn't even flicker. "What's the catch?" she asked. Bradley tilted his head. "No catch. Full reinstatement, promotion to major, back pay, authority to operate across all branches." May's eyes narrowed. "And classified oversight, right?" "Of course." She leaned forward, her tone sharp. Then it's not oversight, it's containment. Stephen stepped in. Chief, you're saying you don't trust them. May turned her eyes toward him, calm but filled with something deeper. Sir, 15 years ago I trusted the wrong people. My squadron paid for it with their lives. Bradley said nothing. He didn't need to. The silence said everything. Later that night, the investigation team began their data sweep. Servers were quarantined, records locked down. Every shipment, every requisition, every maintenance log for the past 6 months was under scrutiny. Tors and Kyle worked side by side, tracing digital breadcrumbs through layers of bureaucracy and lies. But May, she couldn't focus on numbers. She walked alone through the hangar, stopping by the Apache that had started all of this. The air still smelled faintly of oil and ozone. The metal skin bore scorch marks from the battle. She reached up, running her hand along the fuselage like greeting an old friend. "This bird's seen more truth than any report ever will," she whispered. A faint echo of laughter, memory, not sound, crossed her mind. The voice of a woman she hadn't heard in 15 years. "Widow 3, you worry too much. Someone has to. That's why we follow you." May closed her eyes. "You shouldn't have." At 2200 hours, the hangar lights flickered. Power fluctuations minor, but enough to make her turn. Kyle was still awake, sitting on a crate with a tablet. "Chief, you should get some rest." "I'll rest when the truth does." He chuckled softly. "You really never stop, do you?" "Not when there's work left." He hesitated. "I read some of the Black Widow files they declassified today. What you guys did, flying black missions into enemy airspace, no support, no recognition, that's insane." May smiled faintly. "You don't fly for recognition, Sergeant. You fly so someone else makes it home." He nodded slowly. "Still, it must have been something." Her smile faded. "It was until it was." Tors entered, holding his phone up. "Chief, you need to see this." The screen showed a satellite image, a convoy of trucks moving south from an abandoned airfield across the border. "What am I looking at?" Same logo as the supplier that shipped those counterfeit sensors. But here, the problem. The airfield was decommissioned 5 years ago. So who's operating it now? Tors hesitated. "That's the thing we don't know. Every record's been scrubbed. Someone's protecting it." May's expression hardened. "Then we're not dealing with thieves anymore. We're dealing with ghosts." Harrison frowned. "Foreign intel." "Maybe, or worse." At 100, Colonel Bradley called her into a private meeting. The room was dark except for a single desk lamp, casting harsh shadows across his face. "Chief," he said, "there's something you need to understand. The people behind this, they're not just black market profiteers. Some of them are sitting inside our own procurement offices." "I know," she said. Bradley raised an eyebrow. "Then you also know what happens to people who expose them." "I died once already, Colonel," she said. "It didn't stick." He leaned forward, voice quiet. "You think this is about redemption, don't you?" May looked at him, eyes cold. "No, it's about accountability." "Same thing," he murmured. Outside, the desert was silent again, but this time, the silence felt like the pause between two storms. May stood at the edge of the flight line, wind brushing through her hair, stars glittering overhead. The Apache sat under the floodlights, a dark silhouette against the sky. 15 years ago, she'd buried her squadron in this same kind of stillness, believing it was over, believing she could fade into civilian life and forget. But the past wasn't buried. It had been waiting. She whispered to the night, "You always said the truth has a cost. Guess it's time to pay it." Inside the command post, alarms suddenly flared. Not attack alarms, data breach alerts. Tor's voice came over the comms, urgent. "Chief, someone's hacking into the investigation files. They're deleting the evidence logs." May sprinted toward the ops center, Harrison and Kyle close behind. The screens were flashing red data streaming, erasing itself line by line. "Cut the uplink," she ordered. Tors cursed. "Already tried. It's coming from inside the base network." "Inside?" "Yes, ma'am. Someone on site is transmitting classified data to an external relay." May's pulse steadied. "Show me the source." Tors tapped a key. The trace appeared on screen. A single access ID. "Warrant Officer Rodriguez." Kyle blinked. "He's in custody." "Apparently not for long," May said. The situation unraveled fast. A transport truck had gone missing from the motor pool. Security cameras were looping old footage. Someone had slipped out during the chaos of the investigation sweep. Bradley barked orders into his comms. "Seal the perimeter. No one leaves the base." But May was already running across the tarmac, through the night wind toward the southern gate. In the distance, headlights flickered, a convoy accelerating into the desert. Tor's voice came through the radio. "Chief, we've got multiple vehicles moving, but we can't risk an airstrike with that data on board." "Then I'll stop them myself." "Ma'am, you can't." But she was already climbing into the Apache. Her trembling hands were steady again as she flipped the ignition switches. The rotors began to turn, slicing through the darkness with a familiar rhythm. Bradley's voice cracked over the comms. "Chief Carter, stand down. That's an order." She smiled faintly, a sad kind of smile. "With respect, Colonel, I stopped taking orders the day they buried my squadron." The Apache lifted from the runway like a ghost, rising from its grave. Below, the base lights glimmered like a constellation of lost souls. Above, the desert stretched out endless, silent, waiting for answers. And as May Carter turned her helicopter toward the escaping convoy, the voiceover would fade with a single line. "Some missions never end. They just wait for the right soldier to come back." The desert at night can hide everything except guilt. May Carter flew low and fast, the Apache's blades cutting through darkness like a heartbeat trying to outrun memory. Below her, the convoy's headlights carved a thin scar of light across the dunes. "Target in sight," she whispered into the comms. 3 vehicles moving south-southwest, speed 85 knots, transmission source confirmed on board. Static answered her. No command, no backup, just the wind. She smiled faintly. Good, fewer people to argue. She dropped the Apache lower, sensors painting the trucks in green silhouettes. The middle one carried a reinforced container, the data drive most likely. Her finger hovered over the trigger. One squeeze, and the world could forget this problem ever existed. But she didn't press it. Not yet. Because ghosts don't finish missions for revenge. They finish them for closure. The radio cracked Tor's voice, distorted by interference. "Chief, if you destroy that data, we lose every lead we've got." May exhaled through her nose. "Copy that." "So what's the plan?" She looked ahead at the dunes rising like frozen waves, to end it the same way it started up close. She throttled down, banking hard. The Apache swept sideways, sand exploding beneath the downdraft as she cut across the convoy's path. The lead truck swerved, tires screaming. A burst of gunfire flashed from the tail vehicle. Tracers snapped past her canopy like angry fireflies. She didn't return fire, not yet. Instead, she dropped the landing gear and planted the helicopter in the sand 50 meters ahead of them. Rotors still spinning, engine roaring like a threat. The trucks slammed their brakes, dust swallowed everything. Then silence. She stepped out, rifle slung across her chest, heat from the engines rippling around her. Through the swirling dust she saw movement, 3 silhouettes emerging, armed, desperate. Rodriguez was one of them. The traitor who'd said she should have stayed dead. "Don't do this," he shouted over the wind. "You don't understand what you're up against." I understand enough, she said. He shook his head. You think this is about greed, about parts. It's bigger than that. We were told to bury the Black Widow files because they proved the entire program was compromised. You expose this, you burn half the chain of command. May kept walking, rifle steady. Then maybe they should burn. Rodriguez's expression cracked. You don't get it, they ordered it. Your crash, your squadron's death, it wasn't sabotage by the enemy. It was sanctioned. You were expendable. The world seemed to tilt. For a second, all she heard was the slow thud of her pulse. Say that again. He raised his hands. They needed a cover story. The Widow unit went off book, running missions no one could admit existed. When one of your birds went down with civilian casualties nearby, command decided to erase the evidence. Her rifle wavered. You're lying, she said, but her voice had lost its edge. He took a step closer. Am I? Look inside that container. You'll find the classified op logs, every mission you flew, every order that never made it to Washington. They didn't just kill your unit, Carter. They killed the truth. The air between them pulsed with silence. Behind Rodriguez, one of his men moved suddenly, weapon rising. Instinct took over. May fired once. The man dropped. Rodriguez froze, hands shaking. You always were the best shot. She didn't reply. Her body moved before her mind could catch up, closing the distance, wrenching the rifle from his grasp, slamming him against the truck door. Who gave the order? She demanded. He gasped. You really think they put that in writing? She pressed harder. Name. Colonel James Whitmore, Procurement Command. He was liaison for your unit. The name hit her like shrapnel. Whitmore, the same man who'd signed her discharge papers when she was found alive. Where is he now? Rodriguez coughed, blood on his lip. Promoted, Pentagon Oversight Board. He's the one who sent Bradley here. May froze. Bradley. He nodded weakly. He's not investigating, he's cleaning up. She pulled back, the truth burning through her chest like acid. In the distance, headlights appeared, multiple vehicles racing toward them from the north. Reinforcements, not hers. Rodriguez laughed bitterly. Too late, Widow. You think you were hunting us, but we were just bait. She slammed the butt of her rifle into the truck's side, cracking metal. Get in, now. He hesitated. I can shoot you or save you, she said flatly. Pick one. He climbed in. They tore through the dunes, the Apache trailing them above in remote assist mode, autopilot engaged. The horizon pulsed with flashes, drones maybe, or gunships sweeping the area. Inside the cab, Rodriguez kept glancing at her like he was seeing a ghost. You should have stayed buried, he muttered. May stared ahead. Yeah, I should have. After a moment she asked, why keep the data, why not destroy it? Insurance, he said. People like Whitmore don't honor deals. I kept proof enough to buy my life twice over. And sell everyone else's soul in the process. He looked away. You'd have done the same. She didn't answer, because maybe once she would have. They reached a dry ravine, a scar of black earth slicing through the dunes. May parked behind a cluster of rocks, engines off. The Apache hovered above, silent sentinel against the stars. She pried open the container in the back. Inside were sealed drives, old mission files, and one data core labeled Black Widow, termination report. Her hands trembled as she held it. Open it, Rodriguez said softly. She did. The screen flickered to life. Video feeds, comm logs, operation orders. Then audio. This is command. Widow Squadron authorization rescinded. Repeat, rescinded. Mission compromised. Contingency Alpha 9 enacted. Sir, we still have pilots in the air. Negative. They are considered non-recoverable assets. The words tore through her like bullets. Her own voice followed, distorted through static. We can still extract. We just need air support. Denied, repeat, denied. Then screams, then silence. She shut the device off. Rodriguez watched her quietly. Now you know. She walked a few paces away, staring at the horizon, the stars blurring through her tears. For 15 years, she'd blamed herself for losing them. Every nightmare, every scar, every tremor in her hands, all built on the belief that she'd failed her team. But the truth was worse. She hadn't failed them. She'd been ordered to. The desert wind rose, carrying sand that stung her face. Rodriguez's voice came from behind her. So what now, widow? You going to take down the Pentagon? You think anyone will believe you? She didn't turn. I don't need them to believe me. He laughed, broken and weary. Then what's left? Her answer was soft. Justice. The reinforcements reached the ridge, black vehicles cresting the dunes, floodlights cutting through darkness. Rodriguez panicked. They'll kill us both, give them the drives. Not this time. She sprinted to the Apache, jumped into the cockpit and powered up. The engines roared like awakening thunder. Get in or stay, she shouted. Your choice. He hesitated, then climbed aboard, clutching the drives like lifelines. The helicopter lifted just as gunfire erupted from the ridge. Tracers sliced the night. Bullets pinged against the armor. Hang on. She banked hard, diving into the canyon. The rotors screamed, sparks flying from the tips as they skimmed stone. Rodriguez shouted, Where are you going? To finish what they started. They flew for miles through darkness, chased by ghosts and radar pings. Finally, in the distance, lights. A communications relay station, long abandoned since the early wars. She landed in the crater beside it, engines still running. What is this place? Rodriguez asked. Where they buried us, she said. Inside the ruined station, dust and silence waited like sentries. May found the old uplink terminal, half dead but functional. She connected the data drives, fingers flying across the controls. Encrypted channel to CID, defense media, and every open watchdog node in DC, she said. You wanted to bury the truth. Let's dig it back up. Rodriguez's eyes widened. You'll expose everything. You'll destroy careers. She looked at him. Good. Upload 12%. Then 27%. Then 40%. The radar alarm blared. 2 inbound aircraft, fast movers. They're coming, Rodriguez said. May didn't stop typing. They always do. Outside, the night glowed red, missiles streaking toward the station. She slammed the manual override. Uploading at max bandwidth, hold steady. Rodriguez stared at the screen. 89%, 92. The first missile hit. The shockwave threw them both to the ground. Dust and fire filled the room. May crawled toward the console, coughing, blood on her lip. The progress bar flickered 99%. She whispered, Come on, come on. 100%. The screen flashed transmission complete. Then the world exploded. When the smoke cleared, the relay tower was gone. The desert glowed with embers. The Apache lay half buried, one rotor twisted, flames licking the hull. May dragged herself from the wreckage, ears ringing, lungs burning. Rodriguez lay a few meters away, barely conscious. You did it, he rasped. They'll come for you now. She looked at the stars. They already have. He coughed a laugh. Then what happens next? She knelt beside him, her voice almost gentle. Next, they find out the widow doesn't die twice. In the distance, faint lights blinked, helicopters inbound from Fob Thunder, friendly this time. May sank to her knees beside the ruined Apache, hands resting on the charred fuselage. She whispered, You got us home again. For a long time she said nothing more, just watched the sky grow pale at the edges, dawn returning, slow and merciless. Somewhere out there the files she'd sent were spreading like wildfire. The truth was free. The cost was hers to bear. She closed her eyes, hearing her squadron's voices one last time in the wind. Widow 3, mission complete. Her reply was a whisper. Mission complete. Morning came, but the sun felt wrong. Too clean, too gentle for a night that had swallowed fire and ghosts. May Carter sat on the tailgate of a rescue truck, dust still in her hair, her flight suit half burned. Medics moved around her, voices muffled by the ringing in her ears. Someone said she should go to the infirmary. Someone else said she should be dead. She didn't answer either of them. She just stared at the horizon, where the comm relay had been, now nothing but a black scar against the sand. The truth was out there now, running faster than any helicopter could fly. And she didn't know if that was victory or another kind of death. Colonel Bradley arrived 2 hours later, flown in by a security escort that looked more like an arrest team. He walked toward her, expression unreadable behind dark lenses. Chief Carter, he said, voice level, you created quite a mess. May didn't move. You mean I told the truth? Bradley sighed. You released classified data to public channels. You compromised national security. National security was already compromised, she said. I just pointed the camera at it. He studied her for a long moment. You think you did the right thing? She looked up at him, eyes flat. I think I stopped lying. Inside the command tent, the tension could be carved from the air. Screens flickered with news feeds, anchors, analysts, endless words. Whistleblower from within U.S. Army exposes 15-year cover-up. Black Widow Squadron files leak sparks Pentagon inquiry. Names of senior officials released. Every soldier in the room glanced at her as she passed. Some with gratitude. Some with fear. Some with the quiet understanding of those who know what it costs to break silence. Tors met her halfway. You're trending on every major network, ma'am. Congress wants hearings. The Defense Committee's gone into emergency session. May's lips twisted into a humorless smile. 15 years late, but I'll take it. Harrison joined them, still limping from the blast. They're saying Whitmore's been placed under protective custody. Sounds like code for cleanup. Bradley cut in. Watch your words, Sergeant. Harrison's eyes burned. Why? Words are all we've got left that they can't classify. The colonel's jaw tightened. You'll understand soon enough. Washington doesn't like being embarrassed. May looked at him. Then they should have done better. By nightfall, she was sitting alone again, outside the hangar that had once felt like sanctuary. The Apache's remains were gone, airlifted away for analysis. The space looked empty without it, a hollow echo of everything she'd fought for. Tors found her there, carrying 2 cups of black coffee. You know, he said quietly, I think the guys from CID are scared of you. She accepted the cup. They should be. He laughed softly, then sat beside her. You did it. You actually brought it all down. Did I? She asked. He frowned. Truth doesn't always fix what's broken, Lieutenant. Sometimes it just shows you how deep the cracks go. 3 days later, a transport jet took her to Washington. Not in handcuffs, but not exactly as a hero either. Officially, she was a witness in an ongoing investigation. Unofficially, she was the storm they couldn't control. From the air, the city looked sterile, grids of order built over buried chaos. She wondered if her squadron would have laughed at the irony. When she landed, men in suits escorted her through corridors of glass and marble. Every step echoed like a verdict. The hearing room was cold. Rows of senators and officers, polished wood, microphones, cameras waiting for blood. May sat at the center table, hands folded. A senator leaned forward. Ms. Carter, do you admit to releasing classified material? Yes. Did you consider the damage such exposure could cause to national security? I considered the damage of hiding it. Murmurs rippled through the room. Another voice, older, colder. Do you regret your actions? She looked up, everyone that came too late. They played the recordings. Her voice from the night of the relay, the explosions, the upload. The room listened in silence. When it ended, she said quietly, you asked for heroes, and when they died, you buried them under paperwork. I didn't do this for revenge. I did it so their names mean something again. A long pause. Then the chairman said, almost gently, the nation owes you a debt, Chief Carter. She met his eyes. Then pay it forward, stop killing the truth. Outside the Capitol, reporters shouted questions as she left the building. Microphones, flashbulbs, noise. Someone asked, are you a hero? She stopped on the steps. A hero tells the truth even when nobody wants to hear it, she said. If that makes me one, then maybe we all should be. The crowd fell quiet for a second, long enough for the wind to carry her words across the marble. That night, she stayed in a government-issued apartment overlooking the Potomac. Lights shimmered on the water like lost signals. She couldn't sleep. The news kept looping the same footage, her face, the hearings, the phrase Black Widow files. Every headline turned her into something she wasn't sure she recognized. She whispered into the dark, you'd hate this, wouldn't you? The ghosts didn't answer. But in the silence, she thought she heard rotor blades again, soft, distant, like memory replaying itself in loops. Days passed. Whitmore was arrested. Colonel Bradley disappeared from public sight, reassigned perhaps or erased. Half the oversight board resigned. The system, as always, shifted just enough to survive. Tours called once. They're offering you reinstatement again, ma'am, full rank, command of the new Integrity Task Force. She laughed softly. Integrity can't be commanded, Lieutenant. It has to be remembered. So that's a no. That's a maybe. She spent her afternoons at Arlington, walking among headstones that gleamed like frozen tears. There, beneath the same sky her squadron had once flown through, she felt them closer than ever. She knelt by an unmarked stone, the one she'd paid for herself 15 years ago. The inscription was simple, to those who never landed. She traced her fingers across the letters. I kept my promise, she whispered. I kept them flying. One evening, Harrison joined her. He stood behind her for a while before saying, they're calling you the widow again. Thought you should know. She smiled faintly. Some names don't die easy. He nodded, so what now? She looked up at the sky, a helicopter drifting across it like a shadowed bird. Now I wait, she said. The truth's out there, but the people who built those lies still have roots. They'll try to rebuild. And you'll stop them. If I have to. He chuckled. You ever get tired of fighting? She took a long breath, every day. Then why keep going? Her answer was barely a whisper, because someone has to. Weeks turned into months. The investigations multiplied. Subpoenas, testimonies, documentaries. Her face became a symbol, part hero, part cautionary tale. She avoided the camera, the speeches, the noise. Instead, she went back to the hangars, volunteering quietly, teaching young mechanics how to see the difference between a genuine part and a counterfeit. Kyle was one of them now. He learned fast. Sometimes, when he looked at her, he seemed to understand what she'd lost without needing to ask. One evening he said, "Ma'am, you ever think about flying again?" She smiled. "Every time I hear the engine start." "Then why don't you?" "Because I finally learned how to land." Winter came. Fob Thunder rebuilt itself. New hangars, new security, new faces. The soldiers painted a name on the side of the first repaired Apache, Widow's Legacy. When May saw it, she didn't cry. She just touched the metal and whispered, "Fly safe." A letter arrived a few weeks later, no return address. Inside, a single line typed in courier font. Some debts were never yours to carry. B. She folded it carefully and slipped it into her pocket. Maybe Bradley had survived the fallout after all. Maybe he'd just chosen a quieter war. That night, standing by the runway, she watched the training flights lift into the cold air. Rotor wash whipped her hair. The smell of fuel filled her lungs. For the first time in years, she felt something close to peace. Not because the war was over, but because she finally knew why she'd fought it. The narration would soften here, the music low and steady. Some truths break you before they set you free. But freedom isn't the absence of pain. It's the courage to live with it. She turned away from the runway, walking into the dim light of the maintenance bay. Each step echoed like closure, unfinished, but enough. Inside the hangar, a new cadet saluted nervously. "Ma'am, permission to begin diagnostics." May smiled. "Granted, but don't just check the system, listen to it." He blinked. "Listen." She nodded. "Engines talk. They tell you when something's wrong, same with people. Learn to hear the difference." The cadet grinned. "Yes, ma'am." She watched him go, then whispered to herself, "Keep them flying." As she left the hangar, the night settled around her, quiet, unthreatening, almost kind. Stars stretched overhead like faint silver scars. She paused once more, looking back. The helicopter gleamed under floodlights, alive, waiting for whoever came next. She whispered, "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts." Then she walked into the dark. The widow finally at peace. Peace never lasts. It just waits for the next call sign. May Carter had been home 6 months when the letter arrived. No insignia. No return address. Just a single phrase on the envelope, for Widow 3. Her pulse quickened before she even opened it. Inside, coordinates. Nothing else. She stared at them for a long time. An abandoned airstrip in Nevada. A place that officially didn't exist. She should have burned it. Instead, she packed her old flight jacket and went. The airfield was a scar of cracked asphalt and wind-torn fences. The kind of place time forgets because it's too ashamed to remember. When she stepped out of the truck, the desert swallowed every sound. Only the wind moved, dry, restless, whispering secrets through rusted hangars. Then a voice came from the shadows. "Took you long enough, widow." She froze. She knew that voice. From the dark stepped Captain Lena Cross, call sign Widow 2. But that couldn't be. Lena had died in the Kandahar crash. May had heard her last transmission, the static and the scream that still haunted her sleep. Yet here she was, alive, older, scarred, eyes burning with the same impossible defiance. "Lena." The other woman smiled faintly. "You still talk like a mechanic when you should talk like a ghost." May's throat tightened. "How?" "Extraction gone wrong. Picked up by a foreign contractor before your rescue bird ever got there. They kept me alive for information. For 15 years. Some debts take a while to collect." She stepped closer, stopping just outside reach. "I saw your leak, May. You finally did it. You told them what they did to us." May studied her. "Then why the coordinates?" "Because you didn't tell them everything." Inside the hangar, the dust smelled like old fuel and betrayal. A single tarp covered something huge. Lena pulled it away, revealing a half-assembled helicopter. Not an Apache. Something else. Experimental. May walked around it slowly. "This is a Widow prototype," Lena finished. "The one they said was destroyed before our last mission." May ran her hand across the cold frame. "You found it." "I didn't. They kept building them, private contracts, off books, using our designs, using our names." The words hit like shrapnel. "They turned our ghosts into profit," Lena said, "and now they're selling them overseas." May felt her chest tighten. You're saying there's another program. Lena nodded. Codename Raven Wing. Same people, new name, same corruption. May whispered Whitmore. Dead. Bradley. Lena looked away. He's the one running it. Silence. It felt like the world tilting all over again. They sat on a crate under the low hum of a lantern. Lena's hands trembled as she lit a cigarette. May noticed the scars up her arm, surgical, deliberate. What did they do to you? Lena exhaled smoke, taught me what loyalty costs, then offered to buy it back. You working for them? I was, until I saw your name on the leak. She smiled, tired and sad. You made me remember who I was. May swallowed hard. Then let's finish it, expose Raven Wing. Lena shook her head. You can't expose a ghost twice. They buried you once, they'll burn the world this time. Then we burn it first. For the next week, they hid at the airfield, 2 soldiers out of time. They pieced together what Lena had stolen. Flight data, shipment manifests, test pilot rosters. Each file cut deeper. Raven Wing wasn't just selling aircraft. They were selling contracts of denial. Every system built to vanish without trace, every crash pre-written as mechanical failure. The same lie that had buried the Black Widow squadron, repackaged and for sale. May stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. All that death, all that precision, all that profit. One evening, while the desert bled gold into night, Lena said quietly, "Do you ever wish we hadn't survived?" May looked up. Sometimes, she admitted, but then I think about all the people who didn't. Someone has to keep their names alive. Lena smiled. You always were the righteous one. No, May said, just the stubborn one. At 300, sensors tripped. Motion outside the perimeter. Too many footprints for coyotes. Lena's voice dropped to a whisper. They found us. Headlights flared at the far edge of the tarmac. 3 SUVs, matte black, no plates. May grabbed her rifle. You said nobody knew about this place. I lied. Lena. I called them, she said. I needed to know which side you were really on. May's blood went cold. You sold me out. Lena's voice broke. They promised me a clean slate, May, a way to disappear. I didn't think they'd send kill teams. You never do, May said softly. Bullets ripped through the hangar wall. Metal screamed, sparks rained. May dove behind the crate, returning fire in short, precise bursts. Lena crouched opposite her, shaking, tears cutting through the grime on her face. Get down, May shouted. I didn't mean. Meaning doesn't stop bullets. Outside, the SUVs fanned out, tactical lights sweeping. These weren't mercenaries. They were trained. Official. One voice barked orders through a megaphone. Widow 3, stand down. This facility is under government seizure. You are harboring classified material. May froze. Bradley's voice. She rose halfway, peering through the shattered hangar door. Bradley stepped into the light, body armor gleaming, surrounded by armed men. Colonel, she called, you should have stayed buried with the rest of them. He smiled thinly. You don't bury tools, Carter, you repurpose them. You built Raven Wing. I perfected it. Lena screamed, you lied to me. Bradley didn't even look at her. You were always the emotional one, Captain. That's why you failed command psych. May's hands clenched on the rifle. You turned our names into cover identities for murder. Bradley shrugged. History needs villains, you played yours well. Gunfire erupted again, brief, surgical. Lena gasped and fell, a red bloom spreading across her shoulder. May dragged her behind the crate. Stay with me. Lena coughed. Finish it, don't let them. Her words dissolved into static breaths. May felt something inside her snap, the same sound she'd heard 15 years ago over radio static. She moved like instinct, not thought. Rolled left, fired twice. 2 soldiers dropped. A flashbang exploded near her boots. She ducked, firing blind. Through the haze, she saw Bradley retreat toward his vehicle, shouting orders. She sprinted after him, bullets tracing dust at her heels. He reached the SUV, turned, raised his sidearm. She fired first. The impact threw him backward. He collapsed against the open door, staring at her in disbelief. "You can't kill an idea," he rasped. May lowered her weapon. "Then I'll kill the men who hide behind it." The gunfire stopped. The night held its breath. Lena was still alive, barely. May knelt beside her, pressing a field dressing against the wound. "Stay awake," she said. Lena managed a weak smile. "Guess you get to be the last widow again." "Don't you dare." May, Lena's eyes fluttered. "If we live through this, don't spend the rest of your life chasing ghosts." Too late. She died before May finished the sentence. Dawn crawled over the airfield, turning blood to rust. Bradley's body lay near the SUV, eyes open to the sky he'd corrupted. May stood over him, rifle hanging loose at her side. She whispered, "History doesn't need villains, it just needs the truth." Then she turned away. She buried Lena beside the runway. No flag, no fanfare, just sand, stone, and the sound of rotor blades from distant training flights. She carved a small mark into the headstone, a spider's web, same as the old squadron patch. "Now there are none of us left," she said softly. "Maybe that's how it's supposed to be." But the wind that swept over the dunes felt like a voice whispering back, "Not yet." A week later, she returned to D.C. quietly. No headlines this time. No hearings. Just another ghost walking through polished halls. Torres met her outside the CID building. He looked older, too, lines around his eyes from too many nights reading redacted reports. "Bradley's death is being called self-defense," he said. "They're shutting Raven Wing down officially." "Officially," she repeated. He hesitated. "What are you going to do now?" "Same thing I've always done." "Which is?" She looked past him at the city skyline. "Keep them honest, even if it kills me." That night she opened her locker in the safe house. Inside lay her flight gloves, her challenge coin, and a new patch someone had left there. Black background. Silver web. Below it, one line embroidered in white thread. "Widow Legacy Program." She stared at it for a long time. Then she smiled, small, tired but real. Because for once, the ghosts weren't calling her to war. They were reminding her she'd already won the right to fight on her own terms. Voiceover would slow here, the music thinning to a single piano note. "We spend our lives chasing orders, medals, meaning. But in the end, the only mission that matters is the one you give yourself. To do what's right when no one's watching. To keep the truth flying." She turned off the light, the patch still in her hand. Outside, the city hummed, alive, unaware that its peace had been bought with the silence of people like her. She whispered to the dark, "Rest easy, widows, I've got the watch." How do you end a war that never officially began? You don't. You just learn to live with the echoes. May Carter had been back for almost a year when the silence started to feel unfamiliar. No more hearings. No more headlines. No more orders. For the first time in decades, no one was chasing her. And that frightened her more than bullets ever did. She lived quietly now, outside the city, a small farmhouse near Quantico, where the trees whispered like rotor blades in the wind. The barn had become her workshop. Tools lined the walls. Engines, old and new, sat open like hearts waiting for someone to listen. Sometimes young mechanics from the base drove out to see her. They called her chief, even though she wasn't one anymore. They brought coffee, questions, and too much respect for her liking. She never talked about Black Widow Squadron, never about Bradley or Lena or the desert. She talked about torque, compression, airflow, the kind of truth you could measure with your hands. That was enough. Until the letter came. It was sealed with a military crest. Inside a single sheet. Fort Ransom Flight Academy requests your attendance as guest instructor. Evaluation week. Priority clearance granted. Commander Kyle Mason. She smiled despite herself. Kyle, the rookie who once doubted her, now a commander. Time had a sense of irony. She hesitated only a moment before packing her duffel. Fort Ransom looked nothing like the bases she remembered. New hangars, new aircraft, young faces full of restless confidence. The world kept building wings, even when it forgot who first taught it to fly. When she stepped onto the flight line, the cadets stopped talking. A ripple of whispers followed her. That's her, the widow. Kyle met her halfway, older but still carrying that spark. He saluted, "Ma'am, welcome back." She smirked, "Don't call me ma'am, I'm retired." He grinned, "Then you're just dangerous." They spent the morning walking through the hangars. Rows of Apache, Black Hawks, drones, the next generation of machines built from lessons no one admitted learning. "Everything's different," Kyle said. "Composite rotors, new targeting systems, adaptive countermeasures. But every pilot still fears the same thing." "What's that?" He looked at her, "Failure." May nodded. "Good, fear keeps you careful, but never let it keep you still." In the simulator hall, she watched cadets run mock missions. Their movements were sharp, rehearsed, but too clean. She stopped one. "Stop watching the instruments," she said. "Listen." The young woman at the controls frowned. "Listen to what, ma'am?" "The machine. It's talking to you. Every sound has meaning, the way the rotors strain, the way the hydraulics breathe. If you don't listen, it'll die on you." The cadet tried again, eyes closed this time. When she opened them, the simulation ran smoother. She looked back astonished. "How did you?" May smiled, "Experience and loss." That night, she sat alone on the runway under a full moon. Kyle joined her, 2 mugs of coffee in hand. "You still don't sleep, do you?" he asked. "Sleep overrated." He handed her the mug. "They talk about you like a legend, you know. The widow who told the truth. Some of them joined because of you." She stared at the steaming coffee. "I never wanted followers." "Too late," he said gently. "You gave them something to believe in." She exhaled. "Belief's a dangerous fuel." "Maybe, but it keeps them flying." In the distance, a formation of helicopters lifted off, night training exercise. Their blades thumped in rhythm, a song every soldier knows by heart. May watched them climb into the dark sky. "Every time I hear that sound," she said, "I remember faces, not missions." Kyle was quiet for a moment. "You ever think about coming back officially?" She shook her head. "The uniform doesn't fit the same when you've buried too many friends." He studied her. "You don't have to wear it to serve." 2 days later, evaluation week began. May observed from the tower pilots flying obstacle courses, responding to emergencies, fighting simulated fires. One helicopter clipped a pylon during a hard turn. Before anyone could react, she was already running down the stairs. The cadet was shaken, embarrassed. "I misread the wind vector." May knelt beside the bird, hand on the scorched panel. "Machines forgive more than people do," she said. "Fix it, learn from it, fly again. That's how we earn our scars." The cadet nodded, eyes wide. Kyle watched from the tower, smiling. That evening, the academy hosted a small ceremony. They surprised her, a plaque, her name, her old call sign engraved beneath the academy emblem. May Carter, Widow 3. For truth, for courage, for every name that never came home. Applause filled the hangar. She stood awkwardly, unsure what to do with her hands. Then she saluted, not to the audience but to the ghosts behind them. The crowd went silent. Even the youngest cadets understood what that meant. Afterward, Kyle walked her to the flight line. Moonlight spilled across the Apache, silver and sharp. "You know," he said, "we rebuilt one from your old schematics, the one you called Widow's Watch. She's flight-ready." May's breath caught. "You brought her back." He nodded. "Thought you might want the honor of the first flight." She hesitated. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the memory of everything those controls once cost her. Then she climbed in. The cockpit felt both foreign and familiar, metal, dust, and ghosts. She ran her fingers along the console. The systems hummed to life, lights glowing like fireflies. Through the intercom, Kyle's voice came soft. "You good up there?" She smiled. "We'll see." The rotors began to spin. The vibration settled into her bones like an old heartbeat. She lifted gently, no rush, no combat roll, no adrenaline. Just flight. Pure, clean, unhurried flight. From the tower, cadets watched in silence as the Apache rose into the twilight. She circled once, twice, the sound of the blades echoing across the field like a memory returned. Then her voice came through the radio, calm and steady. "To all call signs, this is Widow 3. Remember, machines don't fight wars, people do. Take care of both." A pause. "And if you ever find yourself alone up there, listen for the wind. Sometimes it carries voices." She landed softly, engines idling to a purr. When she stepped out, the cadets were still staring, quiet, reverent. Kyle approached. "Still got it," he said. She smiled. "No, it's got me." Later, when the field was empty and the lights dimmed, she walked one last time down the runway. Each step echoed softly, as if the ground itself remembered her. The night air smelled of fuel and rain. Somewhere far off, thunder murmured, not a storm, just the sky remembering. She looked up, whispering, "I kept them flying." The wind answered in the faint rhythm of invisible rotors. Voiceover softens, final reflection. "We spend our lives chasing orders, forgiveness, peace. But in the end, it's simpler than that. Do your work with honesty. Stand your ground when silence feels safer. And when the world forgets who you were, let your actions remind it." She paused at the edge of the runway, sunrise bleeding gold through the horizon. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. She turned once more toward the aircraft, the machine that had followed her through every life and death she'd known. For a long time she just stood there, letting the light warm her face. Then she whispered, "Goodbye, old friend." She walked away, leaving the helicopter glinting in the dawn. The final frame lingered, the rising sun behind the Apache, dust swirling, a silhouette of both machine and woman bound by purpose, by truth, by flight. And then the narrator's last words. "Not every story ends in victory. Some end in understanding. And sometimes that's enough."